We are so far removed from the idea of America and its minarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. To Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. I am your host, Mr. Roderick Threets, and we are embarking upon another journey, another 8-part series on how to assemble minarchy. We've described what it is, to how to implement it. Then we spent two entire seasons pouring the concrete for the philosophical foundations of a free society, right? In the first season, we talked about the shield of liberty and established the raw, non-negotiable logic of a minimal state framework. In season 2, we went beyond the shield to ruthlessly dismantle the federal nanny states' monopolies on our courts, your currency, your safety nets, and your lineage. But now, as we open season 3, we have to look down at the dirt on this one, I guess I would say. We have to look at the asphalt underneath our tires, the fiber optic lines carrying our data, and the water mains running beneath our neighborhoods. Now, the statist narrative has spent a century drilling a single falsehood, into your mind, that a city, that's what I'm telling you, a city must be a political monopoly. They tell you that if you want a clean neighborhood, functional roads, fire mitigation, and a thriving local economy, you have to submit your property to a municipal engine driven by perpetual bond debt, eminent domain, and endless tax hikes. These same statists want you to believe that civilization is a top-down construction project managed by a central planning committee, right? These are the same people. I just want to throw this in there. These are the same people that don't believe in trickle-down economics, but they will tell you top-down construction projects, right, hold down a civilization that is managed by a central planning committee. We don't need to break the system or engage in utopian lawlessness to achieve our aspect of true liberty. We just need to use the supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution, to build an island of pure contract right inside the system. We're going to deploy the Ninth Amendment to strip the bureaucrat of his planning power while keeping the night watchman locked inside his legitimate enumerated boundaries. Today, we stop asking politicians for permission to build the future. Today, we lay out the deep, unyielding technical blueprints for the Contractual City. So before we get started, make sure that you're liked, subscribed on all of our platforms, from Patreon to Rumble, to YouTube, to Twitch, to Kick, iHeartRadio. If you have the iHeart app, you can find us there also. A big shout out to all my affiliate stations in South Georgia from Glenn, Brantley, Ware County, Toms County, Pierce County, Glenn County. Appreciate y'all. Camden County, and those few down in South Florida, down in Palm Beach, Martin County, Indian River County, Okeechobee. Appreciate y'all. Hendry County. Shout out to y'all in Clewiston for carrying this. And can't forget my original peeps out there in the good old state of Utah, from Weber County all the way down to Juab County, down through the Salt Lake Valley. I appreciate y'all 100% too. So let's get at this. Let's get it in, get the concept in, get it in your brain so you get your brains working. Because at this point in time, people, the stance on liberty is even more important, especially after what happened in New York. The statists have crept their way in, the maximum extremist statists have crept their way into government in many, 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 many ways. See, these people, these DSAs or whatever, right? They use deception, they use lies, they use obfuscation to win votes. And when you can manipulate people on emotion, then you can win. But what I want people to understand, and I think I'll comment on this on private on the Patreon probably later tomorrow or what have you, because I don't want to take up this episode on that, right? But these people, they are anti-liberty. And this is why we need to use the Constitution to bring in the new what's already been there, written in the Constitution, the night watchman state, which people allow to get bigger because their feelings allow the government to expand itself. But we'll digress from that, right? So when you look at the modern American municipality, right? And those you don't know what I mean by municipality. We're talking your cities, right? Your cities proper, like the city of Orlando, or the city of Tampa, or the city of Atlanta, the city of Portland, the city of Salem, right? A city of Los Angeles, right? That's what I want to talk about municipality, right? When you look at these municipalities, you're looking at a political entity, right, that has abandoned its legitimate purpose. Instead of acting as a local guard for your property, city halls have turned into miniature command economies, right? They use arbitrary zoning laws to artificially inflate housing prices and protect incumbent landlords, right? They use occupational licensing to choke out independent small businesses and protect corporate cartels, right? They pile up massive municipal bond debts to fund legacy pension liabilities and pet projects for political cronies. Then they pass the bill down to your children through compulsory property tax assessments, right? These statists will look at this decay and argue that without this compulsory setup, society would fracture into chaos. These same people will point to the 10th Amendment, right, and say, look, local police powers belong to the states. You cannot escape the regulatory grid. But see, here's where my brain goes on that, right? Because we don't. I speak for many. I might speak for you if I do. Put a one in the chat or put a one on wherever you're listening at. We don't want to escape the grid. We want to hold the grid itself to its strict minarchist promise, right? Minarchy is not an abstract theory to be discussed in a university lounge. It is a strict operational standard, right? The state exists exclusively to provide the shield, right? The protection of life, liberty, and property against aggression, theft, and fraud. It has no business paving your roads, running your internet, or deciding what kind of businesses you can operate out of your garage. So what we're going to do is we're going to go beyond the municipality to explore how we can use state level special districts and master land covenants to private source 21st century infrastructure while remaining completely subservient to the strict confines of the US Constitution. So I want you to think about while we're looking into the technical and operational mechanics of building a city without a local municipal tax collector, because that's the goal, right? Many critics and naysayers of minarchy always ask the exact same predictable question, right? They ask it all the time. And those of you that have followed me on TikTok or followed me on X, since 2008, these y'all guys know I get these used to get these questions all the time, but they always ask, who builds the roads? Who lays the fiber optic lines if there's no city council to issue public bonds? Right? The answer is already hardwired into our legal landscape through special purpose districts and private covenants. Right? Now, I gotta explain the nuance to this. I know that just kind of like blew someone's mind. Like, where are we going? Right? Because everybody's heard of special purpose districts or special districts and private covenants. Yeah. And again, your private covenants are um like your HOAs. Your HOAs technically are private covenants, right? Your special purpose districts would be like your special water districts, right? Things of that nature, right? That has an additional tax, right? Like most of your sports complexes, if they're not owned by the municipality, they're in a special district, right? Which is has special taxation, things of that nature. I won't get into that structure now, right? But when we when we're talking about private spatial development within federalism, we have to look at the 10th Amendment, right? Because under the 10th Amendment, states have the absolute authority to organize their internal territory, right? And we see this, right? Florida's a good example. All municipalities and cities are home rule, right? Right. Each county is independent theoretically from the state, but still again subject to state law, depending, in general, right? But we won't get into that structure either, right? But on the surface, remember the 10th Amendment gives states the absolute authority to organize the internal territory, right? Moving county boundaries, combining counties, things of that nature, right? And across the country, state legislators have created legal mechanisms that allow private landowners to form special independent districts to fund and manage infrastructure, right? Let's look at when we think about these various stewardship districts, independent special districts, and master plan frameworks, like for example, here in Florida, right? These aren't sovereign nations, right? They are legally recognized enclaves operating. Let's see, I would say operating within state law to make it simple, right? Now, when I'm talking about that, best example I have is the villages, right? People like when you see the villages on TV, you'll see these little small little enclaves, but the villages, right? is bigger than what people think it is. I mean, the villages spans 4 counties, right? Each enclave literally, for the most part, almost all most of them congregated together, they have their own zip codes within those villages, right? And the villages goes, you go from southern Marion County, right, which is like you're talking Summerfield, Bellevue, right, all the way down through Sumter County, right, into Lake County, right, and even down past Leesburg in Lake County, right. So it covers a pretty good span, but this is an example of a special district or a master plan framework district, right? Now, when we're talking about a strict minarchist framework, right, a consortium of, let's say, private developers, right, or a voluntary association of citizens assemble, attract the land through standard market acquisition. Okay. And instead of incorporating as a political city with a mayor and a council who can vote to strip you of your earnings, the territory operates under what would be a master land covenant, right? Tied directly to the property deed, right? And again, I use the villages as an example, right? Because they don't have a mayor, they don't have they have a community council, right? But they do have like community enforcement, right? Outside of the sheriff's office, or depends on where you are. It could be Wildwood, Florida, would have enforcement. But for the most part, most of these places are they're patrolled law enforcement wise by the sheriff, right? But the internal workings of the villages, they don't have a mayor, they don't have all that, they don't have any of that going on, right? Everything is tied to your deed, right? Now, every single piece of infrastructure, right, from the roads to the high speed fiber channels, is treated as a capital asset. Okay. And that capital asset can be integrated into the initial real estate development, right? The funding doesn't come from compulsory municipal property taxes. It comes from, I'm going to say the dreaded word that statists hate to hear, private capital equity, right? It also comes from targeted usage fees and voluntary homeowner association premiums, deed restricted communities, right? The villages and others of the sort, right? Now, if we contrast that, right, a little bit, right now, if you want to install an innovative, decentralized microgrid, or let's say lay ultra fast fiber in a standard municipality, you must spend years begging a city council for franchise agreements and navigating a labyrinth of bureaucratic red tape. And the state treats infrastructure as a tool for political leverage and union patronage, resulting in massive cost overruns, right? Over budget, right? Outdated technology and artificial scarcity, right? I mean, prime example of that is the high speed rail in California. That's the prime example of what I just described. The high speed rail in California, how, oh, now it needs more money. They was trying to use the rail as a political pawn to get people to vote for them and then get those same people to vote for the tax increase to keep funding the rail that has not been finished. Right? This is what I'm talking about when we're talking about these infrastructure, right? Now, in my model, right, the local county or the state government provides nothing but the watchman's shield, right? Which would be the court system to enforce the underlying land titles and the police force to protect the perimeter against physical aggression. or theft or fraud. The city itself is run like a precision business entity. Okay. If so, for example, if a pothole develops on a street, you don't wait for the next election cycle to beg a public works department. You file an immediate claim for a breach of contract against the proprietary management company under the terms of your covenant. If they fail to maintain the standard, they face financial liability in court, and the market replaces them with a more efficient management firm. Something to think about. Again, I hope y'all liking, subscribing, sharing this, all this good stuff as we kick off this new season 3 of implementing this Minarchy in many different ways, the internal workings, what it looks like. I appreciate y'all, all that good stuff, but let's keep this thing rolling. With that thought, it brings us to, I guess I would say, the technical dismantling of the natural monopoly argument, right? For generations, collectivist economists have argued that water, electricity, and waste management are natural monopolies because you cannot practically run 10 competing sets of pipes or power lines into a single home. Therefore, they claim the state must control or heavily regulate the utility, right? But here we go, right? We have to talk about decentralization and easement law second, okay? Because modern technology has completely shattered the physical limitations of the old centralized grid, right? And they've done it through decentralized utility architectures, right? We can now unbundle these services through pure private commerce, right? Allowing customers to choose their providers even within a shared physical space, right? So when we talk about these microgrids and we talk about local power, right? We're talking localized solar networks or clean geothermal loops, right? Private microgeneration, right? Completely eliminates the need for state regulated power distribution, right? Or the monopoly on that, or vast vulnerable transmission grids, right? Now, on the other hand, you also have what's called point of use infrastructure, right? Which is advanced. I think the best way to describe it would be like advanced closed loop membrane filtration and gray water recycling systems, turning individual buildings or small clusters into autonomous hydrological loops, completely bypassing the need for a multi-million-dollar public water plant, right? So I guess you're asking now, how do we handle this legally without creating a new state regulatory machine? Well, we use private easement contracts embedded within the master covenant, right? When you buy into the contractual city, your property deed includes a fixed, non possessory easement that allows licensed private utility providers access to maintain the physical lines. The utility companies compete for price, uptime, and efficiency, operate under strict contractual performance, right? So I now I have this in my head. Now I have to do the comparison in my head for y'all. This is what happens when you don't write down your bullet points before you before you do your first episode. You're just kind of winging it off what you know off the top of your head. So when we talk about power distribution, right? The public monopoly on that, right, is a state sanctioned utility cartel, right? This even includes your co-ops, right, that run your power and your water, right? And also, we talked about it, the contractual grid piece, right? We're talking about private microgrids and localized generation when it comes to power, right? Water and sewage is the same way, right? When we talk about The municipality, the cartel on that, right? They have the centralized municipal plan and utility taxes that you have to pay for them to maintain it, right? In our contractual city, it would look more like a point of use filtration or private co-op, right? Private co-op, not public, private, right? No private public relationship, strictly private. And then obviously when we talk about the internet, data delivery, things of that nature, right? The city can regulate telecom, right? They can regulate it to whatever, X, Y, and Z, right? But again, here we are when we're talking about our contractual city, right? Open access and fiber easements and mesh networks and things of that nature works out in our contractual city, right? But I do have to mention, right? The the modern administrative state uses its regulatory power to enforce permanent dependency, right? So I want people to remember, right? Because in many jurisdictions that we live in, it's explicitly illegal to disconnect your home from the municipal water or sewer system, even if you're entirely self-sufficient and off the grid. They use the police power of the state to force you to pay utility taxes to prop up their failing centralized infrastructure. Right now, when we talk about our minarchist framework for our contractual city, right, we would actually decouple the utility from the state completely, right? Because again, the state's only role in this segment is ex post tort enforcement. It's called, right, through the constitutional court system. If a private utility company's pipes burst due to negligence and flood your property, the court steps in to enforce strict property damage liability and command full financial restitution. The state does not regulate the price of electricity or water. The market determines the technology, and the voluntary contract determines the cost. Sounds a good idea. Hmm. The last thing I want to talk about is the actual architecture of the master covenant that you would be going into in a contractual city, right? So, I guess the question for many in this would be, and I've thought about a couple and rattle around on my head here, but I think one of the biggest ones would probably be how do you maintain public order or settle property line disputes and resolve behavioral infractions in the city without a stack of arbitrary municipal ordinances? You would do it through the architecture of the master covenant, right? Backed by the supreme law of the land, which is the U.S. Constitution or your state constitution, respectively, right? Because now we're talking private law within a constitutional republic, right? Because remember, we are still operating strictly within a constitutional republic, which means we do not abolish the courts, right? Create rogue sovereign citizen zones or pretend state laws don't exist. Instead, we utilize the sacred right of freedom of contract protected directly under Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution, which explicitly states that no state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. When an individual purchases a home or opens a business in the contractual city, they sign a contract that links their property title to a master covenant, right? And this covenant functions as a private regulatory framework. It outlines the mutual rules of the community, noise thresholds, builds safety standards, environmental liabilities, and architectural continuity. This is law chosen by explicit choice, not law imposed by a shifting political majority, right? If dispute arises, whether it's a property line disagreement or a violation of the newest code, the contract dictates that the parties must first go through private polycentric arbitration panels, right? So this local minarchist type court doesn't spend its time micromanaging neighborly disputes or running code enforcement squads. It sits back as a quiet observer, ready to step in only if a party refuses to abide by the arbitrator's decision, enforcing the final judgment as a matter of contract law under, watch this, the Federal Arbitration Act and other state statutes. Now, under the current municipal framework, a local city council can gather on a Tuesday night, completely destroy your property value, downzone your land, or outlaw your home business by passing a sudden unconstitutional ordinance. You have no contractual recourse against the state. Your only option is to spend thousands of dollars on a political campaign or sell your assets at a loss. Now, let's compare that to the rules of our contractual city, right? Because in our contractual city, it would be fixed at the moment of the contract signing, right? The management company cannot arbitrarily change the covenant without the unanimous or supermajority consent of the property owners, exactly as dictated by the original agreement. The Watchman state does not write a single zoning ordinance. Okay, I want you to remember that. The state does not write that in our minarchist state or contractual city. It simply protects your boundary lines and ensures that all parties honor their signatures. In closing, I'm gonna say this. You know, July, all this came off the top of my head. I didn't even bullet point this. It just came to me as I was speaking. So if it feels kind of off, then that's that's why I do apologize. Um, we've crossed the threshold into this new season. Okay, and we preface that right, and we've done it without giving up a single inch of our constitutional heritage. Right, the legacy city with its backroom political deals, its unpayable municipal debts, its union dominated construction cartels, and its weaponized code enforcement is an obsolete relic of an industrial era that believed we needed a local tyrant to keep the lights on and the streets clean. The watchman is standing at the gate. It is holding the shield. He is in ready. It's ready to enforce the laws of property, protect your life against aggression, and secure your contracts. But he is no longer building the streets, and he is no longer running the schools, and he is no longer management planning your life. The contractual city proves that when you restrict the state to its true minimal purpose, human innovation and private capital instantly fills the vacuum. We can build cleaner, we can build faster, safer, and more technologically advanced communities because every single piece of our local civilization can be backed by a voluntary signature instead of a bureaucrat's threat. So here's my challenge. Here's my challenge for y'all this evening. I want you guys throughout the week at your leisure, right? Look up the special districts, the independent utilities, and the land covenant statutes in your home state. Okay. Then take a look at your local municipal tax bill and trace exactly how much of your hard-earned wealth is being extracted to pay off old government debts and administrative bloat rather than delivering actual value to your neighborhood, right? Because what I want to do is get y'all to stop viewing your local government as a benevolent provider, right? Start recognizing it for what it is, a property manager you never had the right to fire. Prepare your mind to step into a framework where your sovereignty is anchored in the text of the Constitution and your community is built on the bedrock of consent. I want to thank y'all for this evening. Thank y'all for tuning in as we stumble through this first episode of the Boundless Watchman. Next week, episode 2, we're going to talk about decentralizing the shield. All right. And we'll be looking at how blockchain and immutable body cams and public ledgers ensure the watchman never steps outside the boundaries of the law. So until then, I need y'all to stay vigilant, stay dangerous, and stay free. But ultimately, when it comes to you, love your neighbors and love your family. Ultimately, love yourself. Until next time, peace and love, everybody.